Nobody talks about this part of building the pyramids. Not the quarrying, not the engineering, not even the alien nonsense, the part that should have killed everyone. Because at the height of summer, on the Giza Plateau, the temperature hits 46 degrees Celsius. That's 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The same temperature that killed 600 people in a single week during the 2021 Pacific Northwest heat dome. Yet 4,500 years ago, tens of thousands of workers built the only structures on Earth still visible from space. They did it in this heat. And the bones tell us almost none of them died from the heat itself. Here's how. It turns out survival wasn't about toughness. It was about a series of decisions that look almost modern. Decisions about fabric, about food, about schedules, about a substance you definitely wouldn't expect. We have this mental picture of pyramid builders, whip-wielding overseers, emaciated slaves dropping in the sand. It's the image Hollywood gave us. It's also completely wrong. And once you understand how wrong it is, the whole question of heat survival gets turned upside down. Because these weren't desperate people surviving in spite of the heat. They were state-employed, well-fed professionals with access to medical care. Their employers had every reason to keep them alive. A dead worker doesn't haul limestone. So the real question isn't how they endured. It's how the system, the diet, the schedule, the fabric, the beer, actually worked. And what does that tell us about heat survival today? Let's start with the heat, because the numbers are brutal. Summer highs on the Giza Plateau average 34 to 36 degrees Celsius. Peaks hit 46. That's the same temperature that caused a once-in-a-thousand-year event in Portland, Oregon in 2021. In Giza, that's a normal Tuesday in July. But here's the part most people miss. Egypt is dry. Humidity runs 20 to 40% in summer. That's the secret weapon, because the human body cools itself by evaporating sweat, and sweat evaporates fast when the air is dry. In 2023, researchers at Penn State revised the upper limit of human survivability. The old number was 35 degrees Celsius wet bulb temperature. That's a heat index that combines temperature and humidity. The new number, factoring in real sunlight and real activity, is closer to 30 or 31. That sounds terrifying, but here's the catch. Wet bulb temperature includes humidity. At 46 degrees with 30% humidity, the wet bulb reading in Giza is around 25 to 27. Manageable. The same 46 degrees in Bangladesh during monsoon season would kill you in hours. So the heat was real. The death toll we're imagining, though, that's modern thinking. They had something we keep forgetting. In April 1990, a tourist's horse stumbled on the southeastern plateau at Giza. The horse's hoof cracked through a mud brick wall. That stumble may have done more to rewrite Egyptian history than anything since the Rosetta Stone, because behind that wall was a cemetery, not for kings, for workers. Over the next 20 years, archaeologists led by Zahi Hawass and Mark Lehner excavated around 600 simple graves, 30 larger overseer tombs, and 43 elaborate burials for artisans. Inside, bones, thousands of them. And the bones told a story nobody expected. First, the average worker died between the ages of 30 and 35. But that was normal for the ancient world. They died of infection, childbirth, and injury, not predominantly from heat. Second, they were 5-6 inches to 5-10 inches tall, taller than non-laboring Egyptians. They ate better than almost anyone alive at the time. Third, and this is the part that changed everything, archaeologists found healed bone trauma. 2 successful amputations, 1 left leg, 1 right arm. The bone ends had grown over cleanly. They'd been operated on and they'd survived. They'd been kept alive. These weren't slaves. Slaves don't get amputations. They were state employees, with organized gangs named crews, friends of Khufu, drunkards of Menkaure. 5 divisions, each called a file. They were paid, they had health care, they had time off, they went on strike. In the 12th century BCE, workers at Deir el-Medina marched on a temple shouting, "We are hungry! 18 days of this month have passed." One of them wrote the words, and I quote, "I am not going to work today." That's 3,000 years ago. That's labor history. So when we ask how they survived the heat, we're really asking, how did this system, this employer, keep its workforce functional in 46-degree summers? Let's go find the city they lived in. Just southeast of the pyramids, archaeologists uncovered something they didn't expect to find, a city. Not one that had simply grown there over time, but one built for a specific purpose: to house, feed, supply, and organize the workforce behind the pyramids. They called it Hayt el Ghurab, the lost city of the pyramids. It had barracks and living quarters, bakeries producing food on a massive scale, breweries, storage facilities, workshops, and administrative buildings. Everything the workforce needed was concentrated close to the construction site, and that proximity mattered in the Egyptian heat. Workers did not have to spend hours walking long distances under the sun before their work even began. Food, supplies, housing, and the work site itself were all concentrated within the same tightly organized area. And the food logistics from this place are staggering. A 2026 study analyzed over 30,000 ration containers found here. These are elite athlete numbers: 10 loaves of bread per worker per day, 4 jars of beer. At peak provisioning, the city produced 10,000 loaves a day and 4,000 liters of beer. That's somewhere between 4,000 and 7,000 calories per worker per day. The average modern office worker eats around 2,000. A modern construction laborer in heat needs around 5,500. The pyramid builders hit that mark and got state-provided beer with it. But here's the detail that flipped my understanding. They ate onions, lots of them, garlic, radishes. Tomb paintings show workers receiving these alongside their bread rations. Historical texts say they were given them for strength and to ward off illness. Modern science backs this up. Onions and garlic are anti-inflammatory. They contain compounds that help regulate blood pressure and support circulation. In 100-degree heat, when your cardiovascular system is already stressed, that's not superstition, that's pharmacy. And then there's the meat, and this surprised me. At peak operation, the site was slaughtering 21 cattle and 23 sheep or goats per day. That's 4,000 pounds of meat daily for the workforce. Workers had regular access to protein that most ancient people rarely had. But none of this solves the heat problem until we look at what they drank. Let's talk about the beer, because the ancient Egyptians drank it constantly. Workers got 4 jars a day. By modern standards, that sounds like a workplace drinking problem. It wasn't. First, what they called beer was nothing like what you buy at a store. It was thick, porridge-like, low in alcohol. Researchers actually replicated the recipe. They boiled the water first. That's the part nobody emphasizes. Boiling kills pathogens. Every jar was accidentally a water purification system. In an era when drinking untreated Nile water was a gamble, their daily beer was safer than the alternative. Second, and this is the part that got me, a 2021 University of Barcelona study found that low-alcohol beer, around 2 to 3%, rehydrates better than water after exercise. Ancient Egyptian beer fit that profile exactly. Modern mass-market beer, around 5 or 6%, actually dehydrates. The ancient workers were drinking something closer to a sports drink with a kick. So we have a thick, boiled, calorie-dense liquid, drunk multiple times a day. That's not a beverage, that's a heat survival tool. But there was another problem the workers had to deal with, one you can't solve with water alone. When you sweat, you don't just lose water, you lose salt, especially sodium. So when you're doing hard physical work in extreme heat, your body is losing both fluid and sodium, and replacing only the water isn't always enough. If you lose a lot of sodium through sweat, and then drink large amounts of plain water without replacing the salt, the sodium concentration in your blood can drop dangerously low. That's called hyponatremia. In severe cases, it can lead to confusion, seizures, coma, even death. So for workers laboring for hours in the Egyptian heat, staying hydrated meant more than simply drinking. They also had to replace some of the salt their bodies were losing. Their diet helped do that. Salted and dried fish was a common preserved food, and other foods provided additional minerals. The Egyptians obviously weren't thinking in terms of electrolytes or sodium balance. But by eating salty foods alongside the fluids they drank, they were replacing part of what they lost through sweat. In simple terms, the strategy came down to 2 things: replace the water and replace the salt. They didn't know the science, they didn't need to. Taken together, the drinks and food helped replace much of what long hours of sweating were taking away. Not a modern hydration strategy, but a practical way to keep a workforce functioning in extreme heat. Now the clothing. Workers wore white linen, head to toe. Wigs only for ceremonies. Both men and women shaved their heads, and they had very specific reasons. Linen lets heat pass through instead of trapping it, much more easily than cotton or wool. Its flax fibers also pull sweat away from the skin and help it evaporate. Modern performance fabrics use many of the same basic principles the Egyptians were already taking advantage of 4,500 years ago. Linen fibers could absorb up to 20% of their weight in moisture before feeling damp. They also dried faster than cotton. In the desert heat, that meant a single layer could pull sweat away from the skin, help it evaporate, and provide some protection from the sun at the same time. Why shaved heads? 2 reasons. First, solar load. The top of the head absorbs a lot of direct heat, so less hair meant less heat gain. Second, lice. Archaeologists combed wigs from the Amarna period and recovered 3,300-year-old knits. Hair gave parasites a place to live. In the heat, they thrived, so shaving the head made practical sense. And then there was the schedule. They didn't work straight through the day. Egyptian daylight was divided into 12 hours. Tomb paintings consistently show 2 work periods separated by what scholars call the half of the day, a midday break. Greek observers described the same pattern. In summer, you worked early, you rested at noon, then you worked again later in the day. It's essentially the same split-shift logic modern workplace safety guidelines recommend for outdoor workers 4,500 years later. And the body adapted. Modern acclimatization science says it takes about 10 to 14 days of heat exposure for plasma volume to expand, sweat rate to increase, and salt loss to decrease. During the Nile flood, many farmers were temporarily free from field work and could join construction crews. And because the flood season lasted for months, their bodies had plenty of time to adapt to working in the heat before the hottest part of summer. So far, this sounds almost too efficient. State food, state beer, state medicine, smart fabric, smart schedules. But here's the part that grounds it. The bones show what worked. They also show what didn't. Severe osteoarthritis in spines, knees, shoulders, and elbows. Healed fractures from falling stones. Limestone dust inhalation at the Tura quarries. The work itself destroyed their joints by their 30s. The heat was survivable. The hauling was not. But the system was good enough that workers lived into their 50s and 60s. Some made it. The state kept them alive long enough to retire. Now, here's the part that should bother you. In 2022, Qatar built World Cup stadiums in temperatures that hit 45 degrees Celsius with high humidity. Reporters documented thousands of migrant worker deaths. The Guardian's investigation put the number above 6,500. Qatar officially acknowledged only 400 to 500 worker deaths. Many of these workers had no acclimatization period, no scheduled shade breaks, no electrolyte drinks. They had water, sometimes. A 4,500-year-old labor system, run by people with bronze tools and no climate science, managed heat stress in a way that a 21st-century petrostate didn't. We have modern workplace safety standards. We have hydration science. We have electricity and refrigeration and the entire modern medical literature. And we still get this wrong. The pyramid builders didn't survive the heat by being tougher. They survived it because somebody, somewhere, designed a system that worked. Acclimatization schedules, bulk hydration with electrolytes, smart fabric, split shifts, real food, real medicine. The bones prove it. If this changed how you think about the pyramids, drop a comment with the detail that surprised you most. Thanks for watching.